The Buffalo Bills should not be thinking about picking a safety early in the 2025 NFL Draft. I'll explain that and more today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. We are going to spend some time today looking at the most recent mock drafts that have been put out there, and I want to consider what these draft experts have the Bills doing and share my thoughts and opinions on several different mock drafts out there. I think I have maybe 8 or 9 different ones queued up to review here on today's episode, including the latest from Mel Kiper Jr. out of ESPN. So a lot to get into, a lot of different scenarios. Figured this would be a good way to break up all these positional breakdowns that we've been doing and get into the practical application of prospects and the Bills and what they can get done. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm not going to focus on the players that the Bills don't pick. So I'm not going to sit here and say, well, the Bills or this person has the Bills drafting this player at this spot, but I wish they would have done this because that guy was on the board. I want to really focus in on what the Bills actually do in these mock drafts and then just tell you how I feel about it. And, of course, we'll do kind of a classic Locked On Bills thing, and I'll tell you the picks and I'll tell you what I like and what I don't like. So let's do it. Let's dive into this first one from Mel Kiper. He put it out on April 8th, so a very recent one. And it's a 2-round mock draft, and so he's got 3 picks for the Bills. Of course, they own picks 30, 56, and 62. At pick 30, Kiper has the Bills drafting cornerback Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky. At 56, it's defensive tackle Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. And at 62, it is safety Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. I really like those first 2 picks. I really do. Maxwell Hairston's a player I like a good bit out of Kentucky. I think he's a ready-made zone corner in the NFL. Very, very instinctive zone corner that is extremely physical and aggressive. The concern is that he's like 183 pounds, and he wants to hit everything, and he's missed some time this past year with a shoulder injury. So we got to figure that piece out. But I think there's a playmaker's instinct that he just has. I think he's going to take away the football. I think he's going to be an aggressive player in the league, and I'd be satisfied with him at pick 30. And one thing that I hope that you pick up in listening to me evaluate these mock drafts is that there are so many different ways that I think the Bills can be successful with these draft picks. I'm sure we all have our favorite ideas. I certainly do as well, but just because it's not my favorite thing doesn't mean it's not a logical path forward. So that's one thing I always find myself an opportunity somewhere in April to say to the listeners, hey, open your mind here. Don't get married to any one outcome or one player, because that's a surefire way to get yourself disappointed. There's a lot of different ways that the Bills can attack needs and get better on draft day. And so I would encourage you to have an open mind. But Maxwell Hairston at pick 30 is something that I'd be totally fine with. Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State at 56. I love that. I mean, you talk about putting a big body dude next to Ed Oliver that can really clog up the middle. Very instinctive player as well. Not just a space eater, but a guy that can really process and get to where he needs to not just beat the block, but to beat the blocking scheme. He's very smart. And what's fascinating about Tyleik Williams is, he's added a bunch of weight at Ohio State, and that certainly cost him a lot of pass rush. But if you go back a couple of years ago when he was lighter, there was some pass rush upside as well. And so, that's what kind of moves me off of Williams as an option at 30. But if you tell me 56, that's terrific. And then there's pick 62, Xavier Watts, the safety out of Notre Dame. I like Xavier Watts. I think he's a good football player. I think some teams should pick him on day 2. I just don't think it should be the Bills. One of the needs, air quotes, needs that I just don't see the same as a lot of people as safety. And not only do I not see safety as a pressing need for the Bills, I don't think the Bills see it as a pressing need. I think the Bills are pretty satisfied with the options they have. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a lot for these options to prove. Like, Cole Bishop has to prove himself. He's got to take a big step forward, but the team loved that guy. They wanted to trade up to get him in last year's draft and didn't have to. And he got a lot of valuable playing time. He got better. Now we're looking for more impact and playmaking, but he gained some big time experience. He's got a lot of physical upside, and he's a player that the team has a pretty big investment in. They have Taylor Rapp signed for the next 2 seasons. And have you ever heard a non-glowing remark from McDermott or Babich about Taylor Rapp? I think they love him. Not to mention DeMar Hamlin, who's back, gives you a pretty high floor as a depth player. I'm really in on Derek Forrest, the free agent signing from Washington. Cam Lewis is still there. I don't see the urgency or the need for an early pick at safety. Not to mention, we're talking about a pretty low value position. The Bills are running split zone safeties all the time. Like, with the needs that the Bills have at corner, D tackle, D end, speed at receiver, maybe some other stuff, I just can't really get myself to get excited about an early pick on a safety, even if I like the players. I love Malachi Starks out of Georgia. I think Xavier Watts is a good football player. Makuba out of Texas, good football player. I just don't think the Bills should be thinking about safety early on. I just don't. So what do I like here? The first 2 picks, of course, Hairston, Williams. You get big-time answers at the biggest needs. I think corner and D tackle are the 2 biggest needs. And then what I don't like is pick 62 being a safety. Keeping in mind, you're not picking again to 109. So you think you're going to get an edge rusher there? Ain't going to happen. Let's get to Pete Prisco out of CBS. He put this out on April 8th. Just 1 round. But he has at pick 30, Buffalo selecting cornerback Savone Revel out of East Carolina. And what do I like about that? Well, I like Savone Revel. I've said that before the injury, he was a top 20 player to me in the class. Thought he was terrific when I studied him in season, and then he tears his ACL, I think, literally the next week. Kyle Krabs and we did an episode on Savone Revel earlier in the season, and then literally, I'm pretty sure he tore his ACL the next week. And I came away very impressed with the film. What I don't like about the pick is, well, it's a guy coming off of an ACL tear. You're talking about the biggest need that the Bills have. Like, they need a starting corner. And your method in which you're going to get the starting corner is a rookie that's coming off of an ACL tear. Maybe that's fine, but it gives me at least some level of pause with the idea. And one thing I do want to clear up about Savone Revel, I said during the episode that I did on Locked On Bills breaking down corners, I said that he was 23 and set to turn 24. I had that wrong. He's 22 and he's set to turn 23 in April. So I want to set the record straight there. The next one that I want to talk about is Lance Zierlein, NFL.com. He has just 1 round, and the pick for the Bills at number 30 is Boston College edge rusher Donovan Izaraku. I like Donovan Izaraku. He's a good football player. I think he brings a really versatile pass rush skill set in terms of the different ways he can win as a rusher. A lot of length, a lot of different moves, speed, flexibility. He's not a power player. He's not a player you're going to want to play as a 5 tech and ask him to set the edge and squeeze gaps against offensive tackles, but wide alignments and kind of the Leonard Floyd, Von Miller role that we've seen the last few years for this defense, I think he can make a big-time impact. So I like Donovan Izaraku. What I don't like about this pick is I would then become nervous about how the Bills attack corner and defensive tackle, which I think are the 2 biggest needs. So that would be my only gripe with Donovan Izaraku as the pick at 30. And of course, we don't get to see the rest of the haul because he only did 1 round in this scenario. All right, coming up next, we got some heavy hitters. Field Yates has the Bills trading back and then trading up. We'll talk about that. And then Matt Miller, several rounds. He's got 7 rounds, but we're going to talk about 4 of them here on the other side of it. Folks, please be sure to stick with me. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes it easy to bet, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals to assists. FanDuel has so many ways to get in on those player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Folks, baseball's going on. You can get in on that action. There's some NFL draft prop bets that you can check out over at FanDuel as well. So don't miss out. Head on over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, we got some wheeling and dealing going on in this next mock draft from Field Yates, and it's interesting. I just put a piece in the Herd Mentality Substack on Brandon Beane's trade tendencies. I went through every draft day trade that he made, and I discovered some very interesting trends. And then I talked about the different possibilities that exist in this coming draft and like which teams would be logical for the Bills to trade up with or move back with, and got into a big piece. So check that out, Herd Mentality Substack. There's a link in today's show notes to see the Herd Mentality Substack. Would love for you to check it out. I got a lot of additional content over there in written form and video form in the form of film breakdown. So check it out. Plus, if you join the Herd Mentality Substack, you get into our Discord channel, over 1,700 Bills fans in there. We're just a big group chat talking Bills, and I go live every Wednesday night. So you don't want to miss that. We have a lot of fun. I usually hang out for about an hour with everyone, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. So get in on that. Field Yates. All right, this came out on April 7th. Here's what he's got the Bills doing. First of all, he has the Bills trading out of the first round. And I know that some people are not going to love that idea. 2 years in a row trading out of the first round. Well, I got news for you. For as much as people think that Brandon Beane is a trade-up guy, the last 2 drafts, not been the case. The last 7 draft trades that Brandon Beane has made were either trade backs or trading out of a pick. So there's been a shift in some of those behaviors. I broke that down in the piece, but here's what he's got going on. So the Bills trade from 30 to 38 with the Patriots. Okay. So they give up 30 and 109. The Bills give up 30 and 109. They get 38 and 77. And so the Bills get their third round pick back. You know that Brandon Beane's going to want to recoup that third round pick. So that would be a way to do it. And then the Bills trade up. So they go from 38 to 34. They trade up with the Giants. So they give up 132 and 38 to get to 34. All that to land here at 34. Field Yates has the Bills drafting my dude, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I mean, come on now. If the Bills stick and pick Kenneth Grant at 30, I'm going to be really fired up. But especially if they were able to do these deals, recoup some capital, and still get Kenneth Grant, I might lose my mind on the podcast. I mean, that would get me real excited. Then at pick 56, Field has the Bills drafting Ohio State defensive end JT Tuimoloau. And I like him. What I like about him is obviously the impact that he had this year for Ohio State and their national championship run. I still think he's an ascending player, and that gets me excited. He's got all the stuff. He's got all the stuff you're looking for. So I think that'd be a great second round pick. And then at 62, the selection is Jacob Parrish, cornerback out of Kansas State. I love Jacob Parrish. So I'd be over the moon with this. I'd be absolutely over the moon with this. So what do I like? Well, pretty much everything, but I like how he addresses the trenches, which is very different than the next mock draft that I'm going to talk about. Remember, football games are still won in the trenches. I know it's exciting to have like receivers that put up big stats and you can bet on them, have a cool fantasy team, and they're fun to play with on Madden. Football games, real football games are won in the trenches, folks. You get a couple of guys with big-time ceilings at D end and D tackle. I love that. So that's what I like the most. What I don't like, and this is pretty much a stretch because I do love Jacob Parrish, and I think pick 62 is the right place to pick him. My only question is Jacob Parrish an ideal scheme fit? I compare Jacob Parrish to DJ Reed, and not just because they're both, Kansas State corners with like the same exact measurables. But, Jacob Parrish is kind of a player that really profiles to me more in a man coverage scheme. And there are a lot of indicators based on not only how the Bills played defense in the playoffs, right? The Ravens and the Chiefs, their last two games, the most important games they played last year, massive amounts of man coverage. But you think about the coaching influence that's come in here, like a Ryan Nielsen, who's just known for man coverage, right? Think about, he's the Jaguars defensive coordinator week 1 against Miami. They ran man coverage like 80% of the time, and they pressed Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle into oblivion. Is that what's coming to Buffalo? Like, maybe I'm at least thinking about it. If they were to draft a player like Jacob Parrish, I think you'd have a heck of an indicator that that's absolutely happening. So it's not that I don't like Jacob Parrish, but just based on, the norms of what you know about McDermott defenses, and I know that Babich is the coordinator, but is he truly the right type of scheme fit? I'm totally down with it, and I'm totally down with the scheme evolution, but it's at least a fair question. Let's get to Matt Miller, ESPN. He put this thing out late March, and he does some good things here, but I do take exception with some of this. So it's a 7-round mock draft, but I only want to focus in on the 4 rounds, the first 4 rounds. At 30, he has the Bills drafting cornerback Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, who I think is a very clean projection of the Bills defense. And not just because he can play in zone. He's very versatile. I think whatever coverage techniques you want to run, Amos can do it. I like Amos a ton, and I'd be thrilled if he was the pick at 30. At 56, safety Andrew Makuba out of Texas. Well, you know how I feel about an early pick on safety. Now we're talking pick 56. Then at pick 62, wide receiver Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. I love Jaden Higgins, and I'll give you a hot take here. If you told me that Jaden Higgins came out of this draft as like the most productive receiver when it's all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think the thing with Jaden Higgins is he's kind of redundant to what I think the Bills think they're going to get out of Keon Coleman. I think Higgins is a way better version of what I think the Bills think they're going to get out of Keon Coleman. But there is some redundancy there that would certainly make you question some things. But Higgins is a good football player, and I'm just not going to be upset about adding good football players, especially at a position like receiver where, who doesn't want more firepower for Josh Allen, right? At what cost, that's worth talking about. But in a vacuum, yeah, Jaden Higgins is a good football player that would make the Bills offense better. Then at 109, it's defensive end Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina. I think that's an appropriate range to draft him. He's not a big needle mover for me. And we talk about 4th round. These are more like projecting to me as quality depth players that might be able to be a starter. So I think that's exactly what I believe Kyle Kennard is. Then at 132, it's running back Devin Neal out of Kansas. Devin Neal's a fine player, and I think that's an appropriate range to draft him, but there's nothing that really gets me excited about Devin Neal for the Bills. I think he's an ordinary 4th-round running back that you can get all the time, and certainly doesn't give you a speed element. And if the Bills are to draft a running back in the 4th round, you're telling me that this is the last year of James Cook. And like we talked about, in the running back episode that I did on Monday, you better give me some big playability. I want that home run hitting ability replacing James Cook, and I don't get that at all in Devin Neal. So a good runner, like between the tackles, physical, like good player, but he doesn't really bring any of the elements that you'd be missing in a James Cook. So what do I like? Well, I think that Amos is a very clean projection to the Bills. I think it's a good 1st-round pick. What I don't like is you're talking about 3 non-trench players in a row, 4 total with your first 5 picks. That's going to be a problem for me. And of course, Devin Neal doesn't do anything for me as a 4th-round pick at running back. And the one trench player you pick is Kyle Kennard, who I think is like profiles as a high-end backup. So I'm not feeling this one, Matt. I'm not feeling this one. I think you're missing out on, you don't pick a defensive tackle at all, which is a huge need for the Bills. You're going to go into week 1. Right now, you're going into week 1 with what's the defensive tackle rotation in week 1? Oliver Jones, Dwayne Carter, and who? Branson Dean, Zion Logue. Larry Ogunjobi's suspended for 6 weeks. So this leaves a lot to be desired out of Matt Miller. All right, coming up next, we've got another mock draft where there's a trade and the Bills trading up in the first round. We'll talk about that. And then a very, what I would call a classic mock draft for the Bills that really kind of does settle well with me. So we'll get into all of that here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. You've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet health care, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from your favorite local brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth, vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer, folks. You got to check that out. You can set up automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so that you never run out, and you can easily change or cancel it at any time. The convenience is incredible. I've got 3 dogs at home, so trust me, I love that. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. All right, a couple more mock drafts I want to get into. This next one, courtesy of Chad Reuter, NFL.com. It came out on April 4th. This is a unique scenario. It's got the Bills trading up in the first round. So they go from 30 to 27. So that's a trade up with the Ravens. And the Bills have actually done 2 first-round trades with the Ravens. The Tremaine Edmonds trade and the Kyrie Elam trade was with the Ravens. So and a familiar team to do business with when it comes to first-round trades. So they trade up from 27. They give up a 4 and a 6. That's a classic Beane move. Beane's moved up in the first round several times, and it's been the 4th-round pick that he parts with seemingly every time. Actually, when you look at the drafts that Brandon Beane has run, he doesn't actually pick in the 4th round very often at all because he typically trades that pick away. So this is a very Beane move. Now, with the 27th pick, the Bills draft wide receiver Matthew Golden out of Texas. And you heard me say, was it last week I did receivers? I said, if the Bills pick a receiver in the first round, let it be Matthew Golden. Now, I don't love the idea of trading up for it, but I mean, you're talking about the most significant thing that your offense needs. You need a field stretcher at receiver, and I think very highly of Matthew Golden. So from that perspective, I get excited to an extent. I'll be, we'll go to bed and we'll be thinking about day 2, and I'll be losing sleep over corners and D tackles. But I'll be excited about Matthew Golden. So then at pick 56, Chad's got the Bills selecting Nick Scorton, defensive end out of Texas A&M. Now, that's a player I'd be satisfied with at 30. You get him at 56, come on now. I'm getting excited, right? 2 players that I think are ideal picks at 30, and Golden and Scorton, you get him at 27 and 56, okay. I'm picking up what you're laying down here. I like Nick Scorton. I'm still nervous about corner and D tackle. Then we get a D tackle here at pick 60. It's defensive tackle Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. There's a lot of smoke that the Bills are really in on Farmer. They've done a lot of work on him. And so I think we should be preparing for Joshua Farmer to be a Bill. It feels like him and Landon Jackson are 2 players that there's just a lot of rumblings out there that the Bills have expressed a lot of interest in them. So I like Josh Farmer. Probably more of a 3rd-round guy for me, but we're talking about pick 60. That's basically almost a 3rd round. I think he's pretty interchangeable to play the 1 and 3. I think he's the typical type of nose tackle that you've seen the Bills go after. I like how his body composition is really good, thick everywhere and heavy hands. So I think he's a good player. I think 60 is probably about an appropriate range to get him. And then at 132, the Bills get cornerback Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. I think that's an appropriate range to draft him, but that's not the answer I'm looking for at corner, right? I don't get super excited about him coming in and being an answer opposite of Benford. So as we get into what I like and don't like, I like what you get done here with the first 3 picks. I mean, you get your trench help on defense with pick 56 and 60 while adding speed at receiver in the first round. I dig it. But then there's the consequence of not adding a corner early, right? I feel like anytime I do my own mock draft simulations or I look at a mock draft like this, when the Bills don't get the corner done early, this is the type of result you get. And it's a tough pill to swallow because I think that's the number one thing the Bills need to address. So if this were a real scenario, and it becomes a little bit more difficult because now you've traded a 4th-round pick to move up from 30 to 27, I would love to see the Bills trade up from like 109. You got all these 4th and 5th and 6th round picks. Take 109 and package some of that stuff to get back into the 3rd round and maybe get yourself a more attractive option at corner. So there's some give and take there. But what I don't like here is the consequence of waiting at corner, and I think it's pretty obvious. Last one I want to cover today, Nick Baumgartner of The Athletic did this on April 7th. No trades, 2 rounds. Pick 30, Kenneth Grant, D-tackle out of Michigan. What's not to love? Pick 56, cornerback Azareye'h Thomas out of Florida State. I love that. I wouldn't be mad about Thomas at 30. So now, I mean, you've done a masterful job here. You got the 2 primary needs, in my opinion, and edge is there, but a little bit further down. The 2 most important things you need to get, D-tackle, corner, and you get 2 players that I'd love at pick 30, and you don't have to trade at all. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal. Then at pick 62, an interesting selection, wide receiver, Jack Betch out of TCU. I think Betch might be a top 5 receiver for me in this class overall. I didn't cover him on the receiver episode because, well, he's not really a speed receiver, but he's a good player. And so let me kind of get into this. What I like here is that I think the first 2 picks are dreamy. Grant and Thomas, that's dreamy first 2 picks. What I don't like, and this is, stick with me here, I don't like the pick of Betch. Not because I don't like Betch. I think very highly of Betch. But because of what that would tell you about Keon Coleman. And the Bills pick Jack Betch at pick 62. That is not a good sign that they're optimistic about the future with Keon Coleman. And let me tell you about Betch. I mean, as savvy a player as you're going to find that receiver in this class. I think he's got good route running ability, really good hands and ball skills. He's good with the ball in his hands. I think he's interchangeable to play the slot and outside, good size, high character dude. You know, he really does check a lot of boxes. He's just not he's not a burner, right? Yeah, if they drafted him at 62, that'd be a tough sign for Keon Coleman. So that would be the thing that I don't like about it. But that collection of football players, I like a good bit. And so what I would hope there is that maybe you can do what I was talking about a second ago. Trade up from 109. You know, maybe that you trade your other 4th-round pick, maybe even a 5th-round pick to get back into the 3rd round. See if you can get an edge rusher like an Ashton Gelati or Oladipo out of UCLA, something like that, to get yourself an edge rusher, and you got an exciting package of picks there. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed this. You know, taking a look around the internet, finding some mock drafts, some interesting ones, having some conversations about it. Hopefully this helps kind of make some of the application of all these players we're talking about feel tangible to you, which is a good thing. So, all right, folks, that's it for today. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.